What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving my reaction and review of Sony's latest slasher film, I Know What You Did Last Summer. And just so you guys know, this video will contain mild spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to going to see this movie in the theaters yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time, let's get into it. I Know What You Did Last Summer is an American slasher film directed by Jennifer Caton Robinson, who co-wrote the screenplay with Sam Lansky from a story by Leah McKendrick and Robinson. It is the fourth installment in the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise and the sequel to I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, released in 1998. The film stars Madeline Klein, Chase Swee Wonders, Jonah Hauer-King, Tyreek Withers, Sarah Pigeon, Billy Campbell, Gabriette Bichet, Austin Nichols, and Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Brandy from the first two films respectively appear in cameos. The plot takes place 27 years after the Tower Bay murders, when another hook-wielding killer appears and begins targeting a group of friends 1 year after they covered up a car accident in which they supposedly killed someone. Now, plans for a fourth film in the franchise started way back in 2014 when Mike Flanagan and Jeff Howard signed on to write a reboot with no connection to the previous installments. However, this version ultimately fell through. Following the cancellation of the 2021 television series adaptation, the project was relaunched when Robinson pitched her version to Sony Pictures. The film was put into early development in February of 2023, with producer Neil H. Moritz returning. Prinze Jr. and Hewitt were confirmed to be returning in 2024, with the new cast members joining throughout the year. Filming took place between October 2024 and March 2025 in New South Wales and Los Angeles. I Know What You Did Last Summer premiered at the United Theater on Broadway in Los Angeles on July 14th of this year, and was theatrically released by Sony Pictures Releasing in the United States on July 18th. The film has received mixed reviews from critics. Now, at the time of the making of this video, the movie has a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 147 critic reviews, and its popcorn meter currently sits at 68%. With over 500 verified ratings. The film has a Metascore of 43 on Metacritic based on 29 critic reviews, and it has a user score of 5.6 based on 25 user ratings. And finally, the movie has a 5.7 out of 10 on IMDb with just over 4,600 ratings. Okay, so look, when I first heard this movie was happening, I thought to myself, oh boy, here we go again. Mostly because, though I kind of enjoyed the very first movie back in 1997, mostly because at the time, the slasher film was still king on the horror circuit, mostly thanks to Halloween, who kind of kept the genre going strong. And I Know What You Did Last Summer was a fresh take on the genre. So at the very least, it gave us something new. And I'll also admit that at the time, I was kind of head over heels for Jennifer Love Hewitt. We don't have to have a conversation about it. I saw her as the quintessential girl next door. So with her starring in the film, I was all in. But in the here and now, I have to say that I wasn't expecting much from this particular film, especially since these types of films tend to be paint by numbers. So I figured a fairly seasoned screenwriter can write a slasher script in their sleep. So all things considered, I figured I would get a fairly mid movie that I wasn't expecting to be exceptional, so I figured, there was very little chance that I would be disappointed. Having now seen the actual film, I regret to inform you guys that I couldn't have been more wrong. I actually thought this is maybe the worst film I've seen to this point this year. Now, I thought the casting was fine, straight out of a CW TV show, right? And speaking of casting, shout out to Madeline Klein. She's actually from this area. And, in a name drop kind of situation, I actually spoke to her a few times way back in the day about collaborating before she got her bit part on Vice Principals. And then, of course, before she hit it really big on Outer Banks. So it was kind of cool to see her in this film. But I thought the actors did a halfway decent job, including her, working with what they were given in this particular case. I thought the directing was just okay. There were a few choices that I thought weren't quite in line with the film's genre, but, the directing was far from the film's worst problem. I found the kills to be just okay, not anything to write home about, but not necessarily a negative wherein judging the film overall would be concerned. But where the film absolutely dies on the vine, sadly, before it ever had a chance at being anything remotely successful from a narrative standpoint, is the writing. This screenplay was absolutely horrible for so many reasons that I can't even get into because I'm trying to keep spoilers to a minimum in this particular video. But first off, the script is literally a virtual Xerox copy from the original film. And when I tell you guys Xerox copy, what I mean is you can literally take the beat sheet from the first film, line it up beside the beat sheet from the second film, and the beats are all identical, right? And that's just lazy, right? I can't figure out for the life of me why that decision got made, given that this film exists in the same universe as the original, and even includes what I thought was too many surviving alumni characters, and even one that did not survive. And this tells me that the screenwriters had no earthly idea what they were doing, right? I don't understand how you could even think it would be a good idea to put this film in the same universe as the original film and then copy it, like beat for beat. Literally, and when I say Xerox copy, I am not being hyperbolic. We're talking the same general location, right? South Point, North Carolina, right? In fact, we're talking about the same exact opening image. I mean, an exact duplicate of the same opening image. We're talking the same catalyst, which is, an accident on the road. Somebody dies. Same debate. What do we do about the somebody who died? Same amount of time even passes between the debate and Act 2, 1 year. Right? Same fun and games, but you kind of expected the fun and games to be the same in a slasher movie, so I'm not going to eat their lunch for that. And then the same finale, which is, you got to fight the killer and find out who the killer is, blah, 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 yakety smackety, right? But the writers basically, in this particular case, they took the screen playbook and they followed it to a T. And by that I mean that this time the writers tried really hard to hide their killer in plain sight by having characters that you might suspect be the killer be present at the same time as the killer, and given that the killer wears a mask, just like Ghostface, it kind of devolves into a sort of shell game, which makes the only truly entertaining part of this film trying to guess who the killer actually is. That's the only thing that's good about this, is that it's a whodunit. That's the only good thing about this. And speaking of who the killer is, you're never going to believe what these asshat writers decided to do. And no doubt in an attempt to kind of shake things up. Now, I'm not going to spoil that particular plot point at this particular point in time. Suffice it to say that I was so incensed by the decision that I'm going to make a separate video in a week or so talking about what a shitty decision it actually was that they made when it came to who the hell the killer was. You guys aren't going to fucking believe what the writers did here. And I say all of that to say that you should definitely subscribe if you haven't already, so you can come back and be a part of that conversation. I think that was going to be a doozy. And look, most of the male characters that are in this story, they're in the story simply to be killed off, right? And that's something that was different from previous I Know What You Did Last Summer films as well. And it's just you kind of see the agenda taking shape pretty early on in the film. And meanwhile. And that wouldn't, if that weren't bad enough, all the female characters have this plot armor that you can also see formulating, right? And it doesn't even make sense from a narrative perspective, especially when you actually find out what the twist is in the finale, And even after you find out who done it, if you look carefully over the carcass of this abomination, you'll still see all the ways in which the team of mostly female writers went completely out of their way to protect all of the female characters in this story while absolutely destroying all the males. All of them. And that's where you kind of go, so let me get this straight. none of the males are good or survive, and all of the females, like it's so wild that it beggars belief. But I have to admit that once I saw that the entire writing team are almost all women, and as the director was as well, then the narrative choices just kind of made a lot more sense. In fact, after I watched the movie, that's when I actually went to go check. I'm like, wait, who wrote this? And who's the director exactly? And it was just woman, 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 woman. I'm like, okay, so this film kind of came in with an agenda. The agenda being placed ahead of actually telling a good story. So, I mean, you can't even really be mad, right? This is kind of what's going on these days. So I digress. And another thing that kind of really hurt the film is the characters did not act like real three-dimensional people. There's a part in the film where Madeline Klein's character Danica is about to get married, and her fiance dies, and she literally is crying, and you just found out that your fiance is dead and that they were murdered in the house where you live. You come downstairs and find them gruesomely murdered with a message, and the first thing she goes is, "Does this mean I'm a widow?" And then her friend is kind of consoling her, going, "Yeah, but you're a hot widow." What the actual fuck? What? They just do not make the kind of decisions that would correlate to people who understand that the decisions that they make will mean they either live or they die. Jennifer Love Hewitt's character, for her to be so afraid of Southport, she only lived 45 minutes away. And I'm just like, juxtapose that with Sidney Prescott, who, when she got out of Dodge, she got all the way out of Dodge. Like, she wasn't like, yeah, I'm gonna move down the street. She was like, nah, I'm going underground. Ain't nobody gonna be able to find your girl. It was kind of ridiculous. It was really, really, really kind of ridiculous. And I kind of saw what the writers were trying to do from a mental health standpoint. They're trying to make the film, focus on mental health and how trauma can manifest itself in the people who endure it. But it ends up being so effing silly. Once you get to the end of the film, you're going to know exactly what I mean. The very last scene is the most atrociously garbage thing I've ever, witnessed. Again, like I said, the small writing was equally awful, with a lot of characters kind of speaking in memes, while trying to convince us, the audience, that we should take what we're watching seriously and that we should be afraid. But none more than the film's thesis statement, which was actually spoken out loud in the last scene of the film, which is sure to make the male half of the audience simply roll their eyes and chuckle with complete contempt. You can't even really get mad. You just laugh and go, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And to add insult to injury, the dialogue manages to give away one hell of a spoiler in the event that Columbia, Screen Gems, or Sony decide to keep this party going right before this film cuts to black. Now, overall, I'd give this film a 45%. Or 4.5, you're thinking IMDb score. And look, I'll admit to you guys, I might have been able to be convinced to give this film a half a point back if the writers had just wiped the I Know What You Did Last Summer slate completely clean and told us a modernized version of the same story we were told 30 years ago. But that's not what they decided to do here. Again, I need to make sure that you guys understand this story exists in the same universe as the original, which is absolutely mind-numbingly mind-blowing, if you ask me. Long story short, this film is everything wrong with modern Hollywood in that it tries to herald lazy storytelling and manipulative casting in order to resell us a movie they've already sold to us once before. And what's really crazy is that they went through all this to reboot a movie that currently has a 46% on Rotten Tomatoes. My 2 cents, with Superman currently in theaters and Fantastic Four First Steps coming in a few days, I think you should just save your money here. Because crazy as it might seem in this particular case, if you've watched the 1997 movie, then you've seen this movie before. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to go see I Know What You Did Last Summer yet? If you have, what did you think about the way the story beats were deployed? What did you think about the movie's twist in the finale? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, be sure to go and check out themadScreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write, and I'll catch y'all on the next video.